Hello, friends. Good morning, happy Tuesday, and welcome back to Elaborations with E. I'm your host, Ava, here to be your best friend and guide on this spiritual journey. And here on the podcast, we talk about personal growth, spirituality, and those real life moments that push us to reflect, recalibrate, and sometimes completely rewire and rethink the way that we've been moving through the world. Because something that I realized a little bit later in my life than I wanted to is that growth doesn't always come from those big dramatic breakthroughs, but often it comes from those random moments in the middle of ordinary mundane days where something just automatically clicks, almost as if out of the blue. And you suddenly realize that the ways in which you've been thinking and feeling and rationalizing over something in your life might actually be keeping you playing small and maybe keeping you stuck in a life that is comfortable but not exactly the one you wish to live. And that's exactly what happened for me the other day. So along with doing the podcast and restructuring the way I do this entire brand and changing the brand name and going back to social media to promote myself as a tarot reader once more and really thinking about what that means for me, I also do a little bit of gig work for Uber Eats. And the other day I went out to do deliveries, and within about 3 hours or less, I realized that something was completely off with my mindset. Now, if you have ever done gig work, whether that be through Uber Eats or DoorDash or Lyft, or even working on freelancing platforms such as Upwork and Fiverr, you know exactly how it goes. You're watching orders come in, you're waiting for projects to come in, you're calculating your mileage when you're driving, and you're ultimately deciding what's worth your time and what isn't. And that morning that I went out, I wound up passing on a couple of orders that would have been exponential for my earning potential. One would have made me about $15 and the other would have made me $20. And as the morning went on and we started to get into the afternoon that day, I began mentally kicking myself over it, like really just browbeating myself. Because suddenly in my mind, I wasn't thinking about the money that I did make that morning. I was thinking about the $35 that I didn't make. And my entire mood started to shift around that, which is common for people when they're thinking about operating from a place of making money. We start to look at the money that we're making versus not making, and we start to get despondent over what we didn't do, as opposed to being grateful for what we did do. And along with my entire mood shifting around what I didn't make, I also started noticing all of the orders that I didn't want. Orders that were too far away from home, orders that would have taken me places that I really didn't want to drive to, orders that would have taken me across this one bridge that I honestly hate driving over. And if you've ever driven over a bridge in a big metropolitan area, you know the feeling. For example, people in LA can tell you exactly the bridges that they don't want to be caught on, or people in New Orleans can tell you that they never want to be caught on the Twin Span or on the Causeway Bridge, and people in New York can tell you the places that they don't want to be stuck, even though in New York there's a little bit more public transportation. But no matter where you go, there's always going to be those places that you just want to avoid, like the plague, right? But the more that I focused on what I didn't want, the more it felt like that was all I was seeing. Which is funny when you think about manifestation conversations. Because a lot of the time when we're talking about manifesting and we're talking about getting into alignment with what we do want, we're focusing on the energetic vibration of that alignment. We're focusing on what is aligned. We're focusing on what we want. We're focusing on that desire, and we're like seeing ourselves as equal to it. But in real life, it is incredibly easy to slip into focusing on everything that isn't going the way that we hoped, because in some way, we have been hardwired as a society to focus on the things that are going wrong. We have been conditioned to focus on what we can improve, what is going wrong, what we might need to change. And often we get frustrated with ourselves when the change isn't happening instantaneously. And somewhere in that moment for me, during those delivery drives, I realized something. The problem wasn't just the orders that I didn't want, the orders that were going to take me places I didn't want to go. The problem, the core problem, the real pinpoint was the mindset that I was operating from. And eventually I stopped and I asked myself a simple question. Why am I spiraling over $35 that I didn't make when I still made money today? And that question shifted something for me, because the frustration I was feeling wasn't really about the money. It wasn't about the dollar value. It wasn't about the dollar signs. It was about the mental frame that I had put myself into. And I was recognizing that even though I know so much about manifestation and being a badass at making money and doing all of these things that I've been learning for the past, decade of my life, I was not applying that knowledge and acting with incongruence. I was still operating from a place of scarcity and lack and fear, and from this place of chasing the dollar instead of letting the dollar come to me. From this place of feeling like I had to grind and hustle harder and bust my fucking ass just to be able to make things work. And the moment that I realized that, I also realized something else that was truly pivotal. I might actually be thinking too small about money and my value as a person and a creator than I really want to be thinking. And later that day, I decided to go home. I decided to go home after that 3 hours. I said, I have things that I need to take care of at home. Let me go home and do that. Let me go home and reset myself. Let me recenter myself. Let me focus on something else. Let me focus on the quality time that I want to spend with my fiance this weekend. And I pivoted. And while I was home, cleaning up my kitchen, cooking early in time for dinner, I was listening to a podcast episode from one of my favorite podcasts called the Mindset, Magic, and Manifestation podcast with Michaela J. And she did an episode, she's done several episodes about manifesting money, but she did one recently, and the title was along the lines of double your money manifestation by doing it your way. And the message that really stuck with me throughout that entire episode was this idea of seeing yourself at the end result, not obsessing over the exact path and not micromanaging every step to creating the life that you desire, but asking yourself, who would I have to become if the life that I say I want was already real? And that question hit me in a way that I didn't expect, because like I said, I've been studying manifestation and spirituality and the law of attraction and the law of assumption and all of these different things for the past decade. And I've listened to seminars by Neville Goddard, and I've listened to Abraham Hicks, and I've watched people on YouTube talking about manifestation so much that I can literally recite some of the stuff in my sleep, okay? But if I'm being honest, a lot of my decisions lately were still operating within the limits of what feels immediately logical, as opposed to leaning into principles such as feeling is the secret and living in the end and in the state of the wish fulfilled and practicing what that actually means. I was thinking about logical income and logical practical steps towards getting to the income that I desire, and doing things incrementally and operating from a place of logical expectations, and getting disappointed with myself and expecting other people to be disappointed in me when I don't do something, when I don't bring home $100 to $200 a day or some shit. But sometimes logical thinking can quietly become small thinking. And this connects to something that I talked about in my previous episode about money manifestation and the permission moment. Because a lot of people don't actually block money because they lack opportunities or because they aren't open to those opportunities. They block it because they never give themselves permission to want more, permission to think bigger, permission to expand beyond the systems that they've been surviving inside. And I realized something in that moment. I've been hopping on the mic and preaching about this stuff, but I've been thinking about money in terms of survival, not expansion. And it clicked for me that I was falling back into that pattern, and if I want to be this badass in my own life, I need to stop that, and I need to nip that in the bud ASAP. And that realization started shifting the way that I think about my work. For example, this podcast that you're listening to right now, and my tarot practice, and the way that I have valued my time and energy in the past, and the way that I value it now, and the way that I want to continue valuing it as future me. Because if I'm honest with myself, there are ways that I could absolutely structure things differently. Ways that I could honor my energy more, and ways that would allow me to create more value instead of just trading hours for dollars. And although none of that happens overnight, it still starts with a very simple shift. And if you listen to Neville Goddard, if you listen to anything about manifestation, the shift, the quantum leap, the quantum jump, the timeline jump, starts with that simple decision. The decision is the shift that will quantum leap you into the timeline that you desire to be on. Because everything in manifestation happens when you start allowing yourself to believe that the life you want actually requires you to think bigger and better than the systems that you have been operating in, because you are so conditioned to operating within those systems. So if there's one thing that I really want you to take away from this episode today, it's this. Sometimes the biggest shift doesn't come from working harder. It comes from making a decision and noticing the places where you have been quietly thinking smaller than the life that you say that you want, and giving yourself unadulterated permission to expand beyond that. As always, thank you so much for spending this time with me today. And if this episode resonated with you, feel free to share it with a friend or share it on Instagram and tag me in it so that we can expand on the discussion. And if you would love to stay connected with me outside of the podcast, you can follow me at elaborations.with.e on Instagram. I'm still moving things around over there, but I promise you, that page is going to blow up before I can even blink, okay? That is what I am manifesting with it. You're along with me for the ride. We're manifesting it together, besties, and that is the energy that we are moving forward with. And until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep growing and keep showing up for the life that you are building. I will talk to you again soon and see you again in the next episode on Friday morning. Bye.